First episode opens outside Havenhurst University in Abbotsville, Maine. Reacher drives up to the vinyl vault in a blue van. He grabs a milk crate of vinyl records from the back. Inside, the proprietor and a friend are debating the best song on the subject of water. Reacher disagrees with Surfin' Safari because it's a ripoff of Chuck Berry's Sweet Little 16, impressing the store's owner. He takes a look at the records Reacher's looking to sell and is skeptical they'll move. Outside the store, a tan pickup revs its engine. Looking out the window, Reacher sees the driver staring intently at a black sedan parked further up the street. A young man leaves the Faculty of Arts building and gets into the sedan. Reacher watches as the truck's driver accelerates and rams the sedan, pushing it sideways until it smashes into a light pole. The airbag deploys, knocking out the sedan's driver. The truck's driver gets out, carrying a weapon. He breaks the sedan's back window and drags the cowering young man out. Reacher comes out of the music shop with his gun in hand. The kidnapper sprays the street with bullets. As he tries to make a getaway, Reacher steps out in front of the truck, firing on the tires. The truck veers into a line of parked cars. The kidnapper gets out to fire at Reacher, but Reacher shoots him in the chest. Reacher grabs the young man from the passenger side, promising he's not going to hurt him. They get into the blue van. A man in a suit yells out at them, and Reacher instinctively shoots him in the chest. He falls to the ground, revealing a police badge in his hand. The young man states, "You shot a cop." Reacher looks shocked and says he didn't know. He thought the man was pulling a gun. With urgency, he shuts the passenger door and insists they gotta go. On their way out of town, Reacher asks the young man why people are trying to kidnap him. A campus police car with sirens blaring pursues them. He evades them, but tells the young man he needs to find a new ride. They pull in behind a factory. Reacher hotwires a car in the parking lot and tells the young man to call for a ride. The young man begs him to take him with him, or to take him home to his wealthy father. He tells Reacher that his father will help him to repay him for preventing the kidnapping attempt. He admits this isn't the first time someone's tried to kidnap him. 5 years ago, he was kidnapped. The kidnappers cut off his ear. Reacher asks what his father does that he'd be the target of kidnappers twice. The young man says his father just imports rugs. However, there's generational wealth. The young man introduces himself as Richard Beck. Reacher tells him to get in. They drive to a remote seaside mansion. A very big man guards the gate. Richard addresses him as Paulie and says they've called ahead to his dad. Paulie insists Reacher get out of the car. In the car, Reacher asks if Paulie's always that rude. Richard states that he does whatever he wants. Reaching the house, Richard takes Reacher to the kitchen, where the housekeeper offers to make him a plate. A man walks through and says Reacher doesn't have time to eat. Richard's father wants to see him immediately and alone. He walks out carrying a plate of food, and Richard tells Reacher the man is Chapman Duke, head of security. Reacher finds Richard's father, Zachary Beck, in his study. He offers Reacher a drink. Reacher doesn't take it. He offers Reacher a seat. Reacher doesn't sit. Beck asks him for details about the kidnapping attempt. Reacher tells him the bodyguard wasn't any good at his job, not noticing a pickup that out of place in a college town. Beck asks how he noticed. Reacher reveals he was military police in the Army. Since then, he wanders, picking up extra cash wherever he can. He tells Beck that he just needs a place to lie low until the heat from killing that police officer lessens, and he can hit the road again. Beck points out that sheltering him is a big favor to ask, but he says he'll think it over. He calls out for Duke to escort Reacher back to the kitchen for a bite to eat. Reacher picks up the scotch glass on Beck's desk by the tips of his fingers. Putting it down, he tells Beck he gripped it firmly so they'll have a clean set of prints to run. Beck nods his acknowledgement. Duke examines Reacher closely as they walk to the hallway. They pass Richard's room where he's busy painting. Reacher goes to check on him and takes a look at the many paintings around the room. He asks where Richard's mother is. Richard tells him she died when he was 4. Duke receives a text and tells Reacher that Beck wants to see him. Instead of going back to the office, Duke takes him to the carriage house where Beck and Paulie are waiting. Beck informs him his escape made the news, then reviews the intel they have from running his prints. Paulie isn't impressed with his military record. Duke reveals Paulie was in the army too, and doesn't like officers. Beck offers Reacher a job, but first, he has to play Russian roulette with his revolver. Reacher protests that this isn't standard hiring practices. With no other choice, Reacher loads the bullet, puts the gun to his temple, and pulls the trigger. Beck thinks that it's done, but Reacher spins the barrel 3 more times, putting the gun to his temple and pulling the trigger after each spin. Before the 5th pull, Beck grabs the gun from him. Beck welcomes him to the team and leaves with Paulie. Reacher puts his hand out for Duke to return his revolver, but Duke refuses, calling him crazy. When Reacher claims to know that the bullet was a blank, Duke aims the gun at the cans of oil on the counter and pulls the trigger until it fires the bullet, putting a hole in a can. Reacher asks what they would have done if he'd killed himself. Duke says the same as they did with the last guy and leaves. Reacher notices the oil is draining through the floorboards before Duke yells at him to get moving. Duke shows him to his room and informs him that he'll be locked in until morning because he doesn't trust Reacher. After sweeping the room for listening devices, Reacher pulls a phone out of the heel of his shoe and makes a call. "I'm in," he tells the person on the other end. Flashback to days earlier. While having a coffee outside a cafe, Reacher notices a teen casing a woman's purse. He interjects and gives the kid $100 and a stern talking to. As they're wrapping up, Reacher spots an Asian man across the street and gets very serious. The man gets into a car and drives away. Reacher memorizes the license plate number and then demands the kid's phone. He calls the 110th Special Investigators and talks to Warrant Officer Powell. He gets Powell to run the plates, but the website is down. Since he's using a borrowed phone, he gives Powell the information on where he's staying, the Yorkie Motel. Later, at the motel, federal agents come banging on Reacher's door. Rather than opening the door, he escapes out the bathroom window. Agent Susan Duffy waits for him around the corner. They sit down by the pool to talk. The agents that banged on the door, Villanueva and Elliott, join them. Duffy and her DEA team explain that they found out where he was staying from Powell after they threatened him with obstructing a federal investigation. They believe that a rug import business called Bizarre Bazaar is a cover for a drug smuggling operation. When Reacher had Powell run the license plate, it alerted them as that car brought the Bizarre Bazaar proprietor to a meeting with a drug kingpin from LA. Elliott shows him pictures of Zachary Beck and Paulie meeting with a third man. Reacher doesn't recognize any of them. Duffy concludes he saw someone he knew get into the car that he wants to track down now. Reacher refuses to help them or answer questions until they check medical records around Lytton, Virginia, on or just after March 13, 2012. He wants to know if there's record of an Asian American man in his 40s with injuries consistent with a small caliber gunshot wound to the head, a high fall, and drowning. That night, Reacher's standing in his motel room in his underwear when the phone rings. The next morning, the team informs Reacher that his guy was found by a beachcomber. The doctors believe the freezing cold water saved him. He recovered over the next 6 months, but claimed amnesia. Elliott hands Reacher a file that includes a photo of the man in recovery. Duffy jumps on Reacher's expression on seeing the photo and demands to know what he knows. Reacher informs her the man is Lieutenant Colonel Francis Xavier Quinn, military intelligence. He was selling military secrets to hostile nations. Duffy deduces that Reacher saw Quinn in Beck's car and wants to find him. She invites him for a walk. Alone together, she explains that she screwed up on the case of the LA drug dealer because they messed up the warrant. The DEA pulled them off the case, but she's pursuing it off the books. She planted a confidential informant, Teresa Daniel, in Beck's household, and she went missing a week ago. Duffy shows him a picture of Teresa wearing big hoop earrings. She wants him to infiltrate Beck's organization and find Teresa. Reacher tells her that if Teresa was taken by Quinn's people, she is probably already dead. He says that Quinn is the single worst person he's ever known. Duffy outlines her plan to get Reacher into Beck's stronghold, staging a kidnapping attempt on Richard Beck. In the motel room, they collaborate on the details. Rather than killing the bodyguard, Reacher suggests they'll have to hold him indefinitely. The DEA agents hesitate at that. Elliot volunteers to play the kidnapper. Duffy tries to talk him out of it, but he insists because he was the one that screwed up the warrant. To prevent Richard from going to the cops, Reacher says he needs to kill a cop. Furthermore, to sell the fight, he plans to mix live ammo in with the blanks. He scrapes a notch into the bullet chamber of his revolver so he'll always know where the blanks start. Villanueva sets him up with the records and a way to steal and hotwire the second vehicle. By the motel pool, Reacher runs through the last few problems he sees in the plan. Duffy provides him with the shoes with a pocket heel and the phone. In the present day, he checks in with Duffy, describing the job interview and the Russian roulette, reminding her that he'd marked a chamber earlier. By loading the single bullet in that chamber, he always knew where it was. Duffy debriefs him on the bodyguard tied up in the other room of the cabin where they're holed up. Reacher tells her Duke took a plate of food outside, and he believes there's a hidden cellar under the carriage house. That might be where they're hiding Teresa. He plans to investigate in the middle of the night. At 3 a.m., he climbs out his window, over the rooftop, and down the side of the house. In the hidden cellar, he finds a half-eaten plate of food and a hoop earring. He calls Duffy and lets her know Teresa was there.